Can Andy Avalos fix this TCU defense, at least make it respectable as we continue on this season? We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. I'm your host, Steven Simcox. Thank you for joining us. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can also subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. TCU plays Kansas at 2:30 on ESPN Plus on Saturday afternoon. A big game for both teams. Kansas is 1-3. They've lost to some good teams. Took an L to Illinois earlier this year, lost to UNLV, and then West Virginia most recently. TCU is 2-2. They are 0-1 in Big 12 play. And, I mean, I know a lot of you would laugh and snicker at the idea of making any sort of run towards Arlington at this point. But if you're going to stay in contention at all, you have to reel off some wins and you have to start winning some games. But I think more importantly, for this TCU team, if you're just going to salvage the season, which in my mind looks like 6 or 7 wins, which is not what I expected going into the year, but things have changed, right? Then you need to win the next 2 games. You beat Kansas, you beat Houston, you get to 4-2 before the bye week. Then you go to Utah on the road. This can be a tough game, but you get a little extra time to prepare, see what happens, and then go through the rest of your schedule. And I do think it's possible. This team is flawed. They have issues that I don't think are going to get significantly better as the year goes on, but they are talented, and there are some things they do well. As bad as that was in Dallas on Saturday, and as much as I'm kind of losing hope in who this coaching staff is and what the identity of their team is it possible that had a rough second half against UCF, just completely blew a tire against SMU? I'm not saying they're great, but I think they can be better than they showed against the Ponies on Saturday. But we'll get our first chance to see that when they play Kansas on Saturday afternoon. And I wanted to start today by talking about the TCU defense, because I didn't go into this year with extremely high expectations, but I sort of made the joke throughout the offseason that, like, hey, it can't be worse than it was last year under Joe Gillespie. And I would say the last 6 quarters of football have been about the same as the lowest of the lows in the last year of the Joe Gillespie era. The thing that has confused me, I was actually at a point yesterday where I was starting to feel a little bit better about things. And I was thinking through, okay, what do they have to do to beat this Kansas team? And looking at who some of the major players are on KU's roster. And then I saw this clip on Twitter, and I'll try to link it in the YouTube comments here. But it was honestly, like, the person posting it had nothing to do with TCU. It was a highlight about Rashad Smith, the SMU running back who had a big game last week. And it was them talking about his potential as an NFL player next season. But the score was 17-14. SMU had 1st and 10, not quite in the red zone, but deep in TCU territory. And it was a moment in the game where the Frogs said, they got down 17-0, but they came back pretty quickly, scored 2 touchdowns, and it was one of the multiple times in the football game where they were within striking distance. And it was up to the defense to get a stop to keep the momentum going. They also faced a situation after the long Jack Bech touchdown to start the second half. There was one near halftime where they had cut it to a 3-point game. But it's 17-14. I mean, you had a horrible start to the ball game, but you're in it. If you can find a way to get a stop, even just force a field goal, your offense had seemingly found some rhythm, and maybe you could find a way to make it at least, keep it a 1-possession game going into halftime, or even possibly take a lead. And Smith takes a handoff on 1st and 10 and just goes untouched to the house. And I was watching the play, and what struck me, I mean, first of all, we talked about this after the game. The 3-man fronts, that was weird. especially against a young quarterback that you felt like was going to run the ball a lot. So there were some scheme issues. But the thing that stood out to me was not scheme. The defensive line got washed down. The two linebackers, which I believe were Johnny Hodges and Amdi Obizor, came downhill, didn't look like they were going full speed, didn't look super confident, and just sort of ran straight into linemen who were coming up to the second level to make blocks. And then your two safeties in the back end took bad angles, got caught up by wide receivers, and just kind of got driven out of the play. And it was just such a moment of like, man, this looks a little deeper than just we don't have people lined up in the right place. Like it almost looked like an effort thing. And it wasn't a 20-point game, right? Like it was a 3-point ball game. It was a time in the game when you had a chance to sort of take control back, and it just didn't look great. Now, the weird thing to me is I feel like in some ways we might just chalk that up to first year in a new scheme. And I did have somebody reach out to me after the UCF game, and they were like, look, a big issue for the defense in that ball game was not so much, they lost the battle of line of scrimmage, but even more than that, it was the run fit. It was the guys, the linebackers and safeties coming up, trying to make plays at the line of scrimmage and just hesitating, not going full speed, or making the wrong read, and then UCF's just off to the races. I remember talking to Ron Cooper, the Long Island coach, a couple weeks ago. And if you saw this episode, you'll remember him saying this. I said, hey, when you turn on the tape, what did you see from TCU? And he was like, well, the thing I expected, I saw, which was good wide receiver, good skilled players, right? Explosive offense, team that can score. But he said the thing that surprised me was the defense was playing with bad intentions. They were playing fast. They were playing with great, outstanding physicality. And that looked like a group. He said this. He's like, if that unit plays like that all year, they're going to win a lot of football games. In that Stanford game, it wasn't perfect, but they were rushing the passer. They made a lot of tackles for loss. It looked like a rejuvenated and enthused group. Now, maybe it's just as simple as what Stanford was doing. They have less talent too, but also just from a schematic standpoint, they're spreading TCU out. They had a mobile quarterback. They couldn't really run the ball super effectively, and they didn't seem super interested in trying to do it in the traditional way. And so TCU just matched up better with them. But I was really surprised at how lost the defense looked at times over the past couple weeks. So against UCF and SMU, third down conversions, the offenses TCU played were 18 of 28 on third down. That's a really high rate. They did not force a punt against SMU. They forced one punt in the second half against UCF. Even if you can just get to a place where you're forcing field goals instead of touchdowns, that would be an upgrade this week. I think there's a path to beating KU, but I feel like it's going to be a shootout. Like you're going to have to find a way to match them score for score. And so what that comes down to is you got to match their scoring, but also can your defense get a few timely stops. Now, one thing Jalen Daniels has done this year is turn the ball over. Going into this ball game, I believe he has 7 interceptions. Yeah, 7 picks, 4 TDs. He's completing passes at a 56% completion percentage rate. KU's got some good skill players. They got 2 good running backs we'll get to in a minute. Luke Grimm's the guy I'm worried about. He's a good wide receiver. And they kind of move him around the formation, so I'm not sure if he'll have the same person on him all the time because they'll use him in the slot some too. Lawrence Arnold, also a good wide receiver. And then their 2 running backs, Devin Neal and Daniel Henshaw. Neal has 443 yards, averaging 6 yards a carry. Henshaw averaging 7 yards a carry, 177 yards on the season. And then, of course, Jalen Daniels is very effective running the football as well. And they do a lot of option stuff. So it's going to be tough to defend this offense. But they have had issues turning the ball over. They've had some issues on the red zone. And one thing that I think went under, Lance Leipold's a great coach, and he's done an outstanding job turning around Kansas. I mean, honestly, that's a place. This year's been rough, but like overall, that's a place where I just thought nobody was ever going to win. Basketball school, didn't have the resources. You got on the list. But one thing I don't think people realized, Andy Kotelnicki, who is now at Penn State, he was their offensive coordinator for a few years, and he did an outstanding job. Like if you remember a few years ago when TCU went to Lawrence and played KU, and that was a dogfight of the game, and Daniels went down with an injury in the first half. And really the past 2 years, he's dealt with a lot of injuries. And they had Jason Bean in there, who's also a good QB and good athlete. But even with their backup, I mean, they didn't skip a beat. And he was scheming guys wide open, left and right. And now they have Jeff Grimes, who is well respected in the industry, but coming from Baylor, where he had a rough go for a few seasons. And, you know, Jeff's more traditional. I would just say not as innovative. A lot of outside zone is their base and the run game. Looks like they're running some more option concepts and some different things that are a little more advanced with just because they have Daniels in there and they can use him more than the guys that he had Baylor. But Grimes is an O-lineman by nature. I mean, that was his background as O-line coach. And when he was at BYU, they were known for being really physical. So Sonny Dykes said in his press conference this week, they feel like Kansas is going to run the ball 70 to 75% of the time in this ball game. Because if you look at the last 2 weeks, why would you, I mean, especially with a QB that's been turning the ball over, why would you risk putting the ball in the air a lot if you feel like you can just get what you want running the ball? So TCU's going to have to find a way to stop the run. And first down is going to be critical because, as I said, 18 of 28 the last 2 weeks on third down conversions. And a lot of that's been 3rd and 4, 3rd and 2, 3rd and 3. When you're able to stay on schedule and put yourself in 2nd and 3rd and manageable, it makes it really tough for a defense to get off the field. Now, the other issue has been, at least against SMU, even when they did put SMU in 3rd and long, they couldn't find a way to get guys on the ground and, you know, force field goals in the red zone or force punts. So if you could do that, that would be a step forward. Like, I don't think this defense is going to be great. I feel like there's some personnel issues, but they can be better than they have been the last couple of weeks. And honestly, with Andy Avalos' background and who he is, you should expect that. Like, you should expect a team that can cause some chaos, get some stops from time to time. But I do think, like, the aggressiveness that we've talked about that's been missing lately, if you can't stop teams on the ground, it makes it really tough to bring pressure because you're just not able to account for, you know, their base offense. And you don't know when they're going to drop back and pass because the whole playbook is available to them most of the time because they're often in 2nd down and 3rd down and short. Kansas also goes for it a lot on 4th down. So Sonny, again, was like, listen, it's critical that we find a way to slow them down on 1st and 2nd down because we could see a team that's going to go for it on 4th and short. But if this is a week where you can force some turnovers, that would be huge. And Daniels has been known to throw it away. Illinois picked him off 3 times. I think West Virginia did at least once. So there's some potential there. But you have to put them in obvious passing situations so you can dial up those blitzes, get those coverages, and just be ready for whatever's going to be thrown at you. When we come back, did Sonny Dykes say there's going to be some open competition on the O-line? We'll talk about that next here in Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. One of our new sponsors is Roy. It's allowing fans to get involved directly in the NIL game. Roy stands for Return on You. It's a new platform. It's available on iOS or Android. And if you enter the referral code Locked On when you join, you'll automatically be entered into a sweepstakes to win $5,000 cash. No purchase necessary, void where prohibited. You can select a player and you can just give them money directly. And this is NIL money. So just about every student athlete in the country is on the Roy platform. You can select the player, donate to them directly. If you donate, you'll get exclusive content, exclusive videos, behind the scenes stuff, Also, you get to feel like you are directly involved in the name, image, and likeness game. Roy, proud sponsor of the Locked On Network. Also, want to tell you about LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs. It's the place to go to find people for your small business. 86% of small businesses that use LinkedIn say that they find a quality candidate within 24 hours of their search. You get to cast a wide net with LinkedIn because most people that are on LinkedIn, they're not looking at other major job sites. In fact, 70% say that they're not. If they're on LinkedIn, that's where they're looking for work. But they also have screening questions, other tools that allow you to pare things down some so that you're not just going through resume after resume trying to find your next candidate. LinkedIn Jobs makes it easy for you. LinkedIn.com/LockedOnCollege to post your job for free. Again, that's LinkedIn.com/LockedOnCollege to post your job for free. LinkedIn, proud sponsor of the Locked On Network. So another fascinating aspect of this week is the TCU line has struggled, but the pass protection has been pretty solid so far. I do feel like this week against Kansas, though, will be the first time that they are really facing a good pass rush, or just a team that's going to be more aggressive in blitz packages and kind of trying to confuse the offense, trying to dial some things up to really go for it. So they're going to get tested in that aspect. And then KU's been pretty solid against the run this year so far. So can you get anything going in the run game so you're not so one-dimensional on that side of the ball? Now, Sonny Dykes did say yesterday, when asked about the offensive line and where they're at, and he was asked about competition specifically, he said, yeah, there's always competition. There's competition every day for every position. No one's safe at any position. We're always trying to figure out a way to upgrade what we're doing and how we're doing it. Yes, all of them is competing for a job, especially when the performance wasn't very good. There's always competition. Now, to me, that sounds like just somebody saying some pretty generic things. I don't know if there's actually some competition on the O-line right now. They've been rotating Ben Taylor Whitfield and Bless Harris a little bit. They've put Remington Strickland in there at times to help out Colton Deary and try to keep him fresh. Sonny said, I think after the Stanford game maybe, or before the Long Island game, that they made the decision this year. They just feel like Colton does better when he's playing limited snaps. And I guess so far from a grading perspective, that would bear out. But I think the continued issue is you just don't feel like you have depth there. And I'll say this. I saw some people comment yesterday, I think, on that episode, that goes back to Gary's recruiting. I would agree with you right now. I think this is the last year you can use that excuse because TCU has made an effort the last few seasons to go pretty heavy, both in the transfer portal to handle like the immediate issues. And I would say you've got mixed results there, but also you've brought in a lot of young linemen the last couple seasons. Some of those guys need to start cracking the two deep. Now, Whitfield has. I think he struggled when he's been out there, but he is somebody that they, have kind of thrown in the fire from his freshman season on. So I believe this is the last season that you can really focus on, okay, you just got to try to build this O-line group, get more depth there, and, have more options. You got to start seeing some return on your results and the guys that you scouted and recruited. Because so far, I hope it changes, but just to be honest, the evaluation in the portal on these O-linemen hasn't been fantastic. Now, there's multiple college football analysts that have said, listen, you can't build an offensive line in the portal. Like teams have tried to do it. They haven't had much success with it. Colorado's kind of dealing with the same thing with Shedeur Sanders right now. They can't keep him clean. Now they're 3-1. I mean, they figured out a way to fight through it, but they still have O-line issues, and they went pretty heavy in the portal as well. But I will say, SMU, that's a portal-heavy offensive line too, and they looked all right. I mean, they looked pretty good against the TCU defense on Saturday afternoon. So we'll see how it shakes out this week against Kansas, but something to watch. I do think that KU pass rush is more formidable So the pass protection that's been so solid is going to be tested this week. When we come back, I'll get some of your reactions from the last few shows. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Make sure you check out FanDuel. If you join FanDuel right now, the FanDuel app or FanDuel.com, make one $5 bet, get $200 in bonus bets. One $5 bet, get you $200 in bonus bets. FanDuel app or FanDuel.com. FanDuel, it's where the game starts. All right, so you can always chime in on the action on our YouTube channel in the comments. You can also find us or find me on Twitter at SimcockSteve. And I haven't been on Twitter as much this week, but I'm around if you want me to answer some questions. Zoom Play says Matt is right. That's Coach Dykes' favorite sentence. We had a great practice. Yep, he does. I mean, he's always surprised by the results, it seems like, and he always feels like the team had a good week in practice. And you know, I said this yesterday. I was like, I don't think there's anything good that you can say after a big-time loss, but I get why people are frustrated when you come out there and you're like, well, we're practicing well, you know, ho-hum. It makes it sound like you don't know what you're doing or, I mean, it just makes you look very unprepared. So it's not a great look. But he did say yesterday, he was asked the question directly. And he said he felt like they were having a great week of practice so far. So take that for what it's worth. Jacob Langford said, why is the ejection the big deal? You guys keep harping on it. I appreciated his fire against the rest that day. His team needed to see something. Not glad he got tossed, but he stood up against bad calls, in my opinion. I mean, my issue was, man, like, you just have to have more awareness. That game was still in the balance. Like, I don't know if they win if Sonny stays on the sideline. My guess would be no. But you're the head coach. You got to find a way to stay on the field. And, yeah, I like his fire for the refs too. Like, I enjoy that he's fighting for his players. But where's that type of accountability for his coaching staff, for the guys on the field? Like, they got screwed over by the refs a few times, but you don't give up 66 points because of bad calls. Like, this is just a team that's struggling right now. I didn't think that was the best, scenario for him to get kicked out of the ball game. I don't think he expected to, but he got carried away, and that's what happened. Not sure what this username is, but they say, great breakdown today. Like some Matt Jennings on the show. Thank you for watching the show. Thanks for listening. I enjoy Matt's on the show too. It's always good to talk to him and get his perspective on things. I did want to get to one Twitter message that I saw. Logan Thompson. He says, are you concerned that this team is not playing as fast and as freely compared to that national championship appearance run in 2022? Well, I talked about that a little bit in segment one. I thought the team was playing kind of slow. Yeah, I'm concerned about it. I would say, stuff like that is so dependent on winning and losing. When you win, when you play well, you build confidence. So that team in 2022, I think they had a lot of mental toughness, but they won a few tough games. And then whether it was against Baylor, whether it was against Tech, as the season wore on, they just weren't really frazzled by falling behind, in large deficits because they felt like they were going to fight back. Even against Kansas State in the Big 12 title game, looks like the game was over and they were able to force overtime. They just had that ability about them. But I think it was built on they won some tough games. They went through some big moments together and they trusted themselves and they trusted each other. And they just thought no matter what the score was, we're going to find a way to get it done. This team is different. And right now I think they need a shot of confidence. And a good way to start would be by going on the road and getting a victory against Kansas. Crossover episode tomorrow with Derek Johnson of Locked On Kansas or Locked On Jayhawks. It's Locked On Horned Frogs here. Your team every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast.